Hey everyone, my name is Rachel and today I'm going to be talking about the wonder that is G-Man. He finally responded to me as he said he would like a month ago. And I'll be honest, first impressions are that he was actually like quite nice to me to start with. It was more than I expected, which is pretty cool. However, I still think he's misguided on some of the things that he talks about, particularly evolution. I think perhaps it's past the point now where he's gonna listen to anyone else, in particular me. So this video isn't really for him, it's more for funsies, pretty much. And he did mention a few things, a few questions that I thought would be interesting talking points for the rest of us. So let's just jump into this and kind of like see where it goes. His video about me is about 2 hours long and I didn't realise I was that interesting or relevant, but whatever. So I'm going to be skipping over a few of the more repetitive bits and the boring bits and the unimportant bits and just focusing on a few key points, because otherwise this would be like a 6-hour response video and then he'd put out a 12-hour response video and then no one would ever have a life again. So first things first, let's talk about my face. Apparently he thinks I'm a nice girl, although I'm a little creeped out by a couple of the comments on my looks. He did mention that my channel is blowing up for what he states are obvious reasons. Apparently it isn't my content. And I mean, he has a point. People don't subscribe to YouTubers anymore because they like their content, do they? I mean, I remember when I first found Cosmic Skeptic's channel. It was sometime last year and I didn't subscribe because I thought he was intelligent or that he talked about interesting stuff. I subscribed because I, as a grown woman, clearly have an insatiable lust for 17-year-old boys. Obviously. No, I joke. But seriously, like, comment on my looks if you want, but let's be honest, I'm just a pretty average person who just happens to be a girl. And I think it's the whole woman thing that maybe stands out, because as a woman in a pretty male-dominated community, yeah, maybe I stand out a little at first, and that might draw people to my channel. But people aren't going to stick around if they're not interested in what I have to say, if they don't care about what I have to say, right? Because you want to look at girls, you want to look at girls who are much prettier than me, you want to look at girls who are dressed a lot less revealing than me, then go to Instagram or any other number of websites, which I'm not going to mention. And truth is, if that's all you're looking for, then my channel probably isn't the place to be, because as often as I look like this, I also look like this. Anyway, that's my face out of the way. So G-Man made this interesting point.
We all know that atheists are sitting here rejecting the Christian God and the Muslim God, but you got other religions doing the same thing and they're not atheists.
And I have to say this is an excellent point, because it does make more sense to replace worshipping one imaginary being with another, instead of just taking personal responsibility for your life. I completely agree. That is logical. Another thing I think is important to talk about is the whole knife thing. I mentioned in my original video, I was like, I'm hoping this is just a kind of opening gimmick type thing. And he does confirm that waving the knife around was just an attention grabbing thing. Cool. I'm good with that. I can understand that. I can appreciate that. I mean, it's still a little alien to me because in most parts of the UK, weapons, whether it be knives or guns or anything else, they're kind of the two main categories, aren't they? They aren't really commonplace, so I guess that's why it's a bit shocking to me. But as a YouTuber, I can completely relate to wanting to grab the audience's attention. I mean, I try and do that by, you know, presenting myself nicely. I tend to use a good quality camera. I'm improving my equipment where I can. I try and grab your attention with interesting topics and well-researched content. But yeah, no, waving a knife around works as well, right? So why not? I can respect that. It did grab my attention, so, you know, good for him. Now, the next big thing, which is kind of the main bulk of what I want this video to be, and what I think was the kind of most interesting point of his 2-hour video, was the 5-minute section where he talks about evolution. He states this.
You want irrefutable proof that God exists, but you don't even have irrefutable proof that evolution is a science, and you accept that. According to what the actual essence of what science is, it deals with observation. You know what I mean? You never observe a lot of the things that you believe about the theory. What you believe about it is what I believe, and that's variations within the kinds. And you have no evidence, no proof of it. A scientist will show you a bone.
There is evidence and there is proof, and we do have observations. I mean, it can be a little bit of a confusing one, right? Because sometimes when people hear the word observations, they think it means that you need to see it right there in front of them in the here and now, that you need to see it happening right now at this moment. But that's not really what observations mean. It really just, and I'm oversimplifying this a lot, but it really just means that you can objectively view the raw data and it's open to everyone, if that makes sense. And everyone can go ahead and see it. Someone can make observations about a fossil. You can observe where you found it, what it looks like, its structure, how old it is, and so on and so on. That's why fossil records are valid observations and count as evidence in science. Okay. I also think it's important to talk about how evolution is basically just about observing change of living things over time, like over a long period of time, millions of years. Again, oversimplifying this a hell of a lot, but I just kind of want to make this accessible to everyone. And we are still seeing things change today, which is, if you want to put it that way, here and now observable proof of evolution. Take antibiotic-resistant bacteria strains, for example. This is literally evidence of an organism changing and adapting to fit its circumstances and its environment. A new trait appears in an organism which provides a higher chance of survival. These organisms then get more of a chance to reproduce, they pass the trait onto their offspring, and then the new trait becomes the dominant one in that species, and so on and so on. Sometimes this can just mean that a species changes a bit, or it can sometimes mean that a whole new species is formed, or in the case of bacteria, a whole new strain of bacteria, or whatever. I think probably the most famous example of this is MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Big word. I'm glad I got that one out. I mean, you can't deny that once there was a bacteria called Staphylococcus aureus, and it infected people, and it made people ill. Then medicines like penicillin, and more specifically methicillin, were used to treat it. Then, around the late 50s, early 60s, we started to notice that sometimes the methicillin wasn't working. The original staph bacteria started to produce some offspring which were resistant to methicillin, and they started to reproduce, and then they started to reproduce, and so on and so on. So now, Staphylococcus aureus is one type of bacteria, and the methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus is a second genetically different strain of bacteria. They both started out together, but some of them adapted and reproduced, and some of them didn't and reproduced, and now we have two separate strains of bacteria. This is literally here and now observable proof of evolution. And you can say, oh, it doesn't prove macroevolution, but kind of does, because you can't deny this happened. MRSA wasn't around 70 years ago, so where else did it come from? And if this happened once, why can't a second change happen? And a second change, and a second change? Why can't organisms keep on adapting and creating new types of organism and so on? That's basically all evolution is. Lots and lots and lots of tiny little changes adding up and building up over time. It might seem impossible to look at us and to look at a monkey and say, oh, but they're just so different. But when you take into account the millions of years and the tiny, tiny, tiny changes building up and building up, it makes perfect logical sense.
And we'll tell you what they think happened, and then you'll accept that. A scientist will show you something in a science book, and then you'll just accept that on faith. It ain't got nothing to do with no real science.
Science books and stuff, it's a great way to have things explained to you, for you to learn about stuff, so you don't have to carry out every single experiment or observation or study yourself, which would be expensive and time-consuming for everyone. But you never have to just take things at face value. With science, there's always an opportunity to carry out experiments for yourself if you want. There's always a chance for you to look at the raw data and come up with your own interpretations and analysis and whatever. Even when I was back doing my first year of biomed at uni, we had this really, really cool lab, right? And the idea was that when we were doing our lab experiments and stuff, we weren't just told what to think, we weren't told what to look for. It was about understanding and learning to identify things for yourself, and also just understanding the scientific process. There's this one in particular that my personal tutor at the time, Kevin Purdy, I think he designed it, and it went on for a couple of weeks, and we were given something like 10 different samples of bacteria, and we had to carry out a series of tests to identify what bacteria was in each sample. So we had to do basic things like gram stains and like observing characteristics under a microscope and stuff. And then there were some tests that were a bit more complicated. And like I said, this went on for a couple of weeks, but it was so good. It's this fantastic, fantastic learning experience. Because it wasn't just about being told what was true, and it wasn't just about being told what to look for. It was about searching for the truth ourselves. It was about everyone getting the same raw data, you know, in the form of these bacteria samples. And it was about making our own observations and coming to our own conclusions, and then comparing our findings with everyone else and discussing what we'd found and what we thought was correct, and then coming to conclusions and saying, well, if everyone observed this in this sample, and everyone thought this, and these people carried out this test and found this, and these people carried out this test and found this, then this bacteria must be X. It was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed it. And I mean, this was a teaching experience, so the tutors already knew what bacteria was in each sample and they could tell us if we were right or not. My point is that we weren't just being told something. We weren't just told, this is bacteria X, look at it. We were told, you know, we found that these bacteria have these characteristics, and you can find this characteristic by doing this and this. Now, identify what this is. It was about learning for ourselves and not just being told what was true. Just being told something and feeling like you have to believe it is not how science works. It's the complete opposite. Next up, G-Man decided to talk about this whole like proof of God thing, and he asked me this.
Rachel Oates, I want to ask you another question. What kind of evidence would it take for you to believe that the God of the Bible exists?
I find this question a little bit problematic because a lot of people do ask it, and if we're going to use like an actual kind of scientific method, then the idea is that you first collect evidence and data and then you come to a conclusion. So ideally, you'd want to look at a bunch of evidence and say, I have this evidence, I have this evidence, I have this evidence. This all points to the conclusion that God exists or God doesn't exist. So you can't really say proof of God would be X, Y, and Z, now show it to me. Because that's working backwards, and that's not how things work. All I can really like kind of accurately say is, this is how the world is, this is how things work, and then this is my conclusion. And my personal conclusion from observing the world, from learning about the world, is that there's no solid proof that a God exists. And that's why I have that belief, or lack of belief, whatever you want to call it. Although, you know, I'm just humour him for a second, like, proof of the God in the Bible existing. Okay, please show me fossil records of Adam and Eve existing. Show me proof that God was created from dirt by God. Show me how that happened and show me that God did it. Show me proof that Eve was created from Adam's rib by God. Again, show me proof that that happened and how God did it. Show me proof that God created the earth and animals and plants, and please explain at what point he created them. Did he put like a single-celled organism on this planet and watch them evolve, or did he put fully formed humans as we now know them, as we are today? And did he just put us on the planet? And if so, when did he do that exactly, and what's your proof of that? And how do you explain away things like fossils and bones of other human/ape-like species? I'm simplifying again. Can you show me proof of God answering prayers, and can you show me that it could only have been God who answered them and not just luck or chance or coincidence or actions of other people? Can you show me proof that Mary was a virgin when she fell pregnant with Jesus? Can you show me evidence of how he was conceived? Because I'm a little bit confused about this. Like, can you show me proof that Jesus, the man who claimed he was the Son of God, can you show me some evidence in his DNA that shows, for example, that he was the Son of God? Maybe his DNA was completely new and different to everyone else's. Maybe he only shared DNA with Mary because he was essentially like a clone of her. Or did God clone Mary? Or did he invent some random sperm cell and put that into her uterus and impregnate her? And if so, whose sperm was it? What was the DNA in that sperm? Was it God's sperm? What happened? How did it work? I mean, these are just a couple of questions, and you know, proof, evidence of this stuff. This would be really good. I mean, there's a lot more questions I have to have answered and a lot more evidence I'd need before I believe in the God of the Bible. But yeah, no, this would be a good start if you could answer those questions, please.